good to use it. But yeah, that's interesting. I also thought in the past something about like, potential space in terms of probably Voronoi is the easiest way of telling you where potentially a player could reach without doing like very sophisticated calculations. So.
Yeah, we're on live again now, actually, but on a new stream. So I put it up.
Oh, a new stream. Okay.
Yeah, we're on a new stream, so we've got 2 people watching.
Yeah, I think one of them is me. So.
And the other is me now. So yes.
Yeah, right. So we're just going to watch ourselves all night long, going through this. I was really enjoying that. I mean, that was a fascinating thing. Actually, I was really getting into that. I don't know where it got cut off. There's a few people coming in, so it's not worth it. It's maybe not. We'll just give it a few seconds if there's a few more people who want to come in, and I'll just put it on Twitter as well.
In the meantime, I'm going to tidy up my desktop.
Yeah, I mean, people thought that was like a large amount of documents on the desktop. I saw it pretty clean from my perspective. For me, it was like it looks good, but they probably haven't seen mine. So I'm always cleaning that every 4 months and just deleting things like where these things came from.
Yeah, the reason is that I have it download automatically to my desktop, so like things just kind of accumulate there as I download them.
Yeah, no, I do the same thing. No, it seems that we just got lost. Just at the moment, I got really passionate about mathematics of Delaunay triangulations and Voronoi diagrams. It seems that we lost the live screen, but we've got a few people who've joined us for the last part of this. So what our suggestion was, the problem is that we've lost it. Can we go back and see the questions in the other one? We don't know if we've got the people. So if you're in this stream, and you would like to ask a few questions either about the sorts of things we were talking about just now, the analyses that have been put up on Twitter, or if you want to go back to Laurie's presentation, or you just want to hear, there's a lot of people who just want to hear you, Javier, talk about trying or Voronoi diagrams a little bit more. Just put in your question and we'll pick one at a time and go through them and try and answer them. So I might be, yeah, go as maybe I'm going to put Fran on the spot. Have you found a question there that you want you would like to have a look at?
Well, I read a question at the beginning or the middle of the stream, and I mean, it wasn't really related to the homework or anything like that, but it was more like, why don't use GPS vests or these kind of things instead of optical tracking data? And I would say that the main reason for that is that if you just wear GPS, then you can't control the other team wearing GPS and giving the data and giving you the data. And of course, you don't have the ball. So that's the main problem in case you have good reception in your stadium. And the other one is that your stadium is super big and with steep stands, then the GPS usually fails, and you need to have like local GPS, which is super expensive. And that's the main thing. I mean, you really want to have the other team, and you really want to have the ball tracked, and you have to do it with optical data.
Cool. Javier, have you got one that you picked out there?
Sorry?
Have you got a question you picked out on the...
Yeah, I was jumping from one chat to another, but if Laurie has one or you have one, please jump in. I want to read a little bit more to see if I see.
Okay, Laurie, go ahead.
You pick one actually, because I'm not looking at it at the moment.
Well, I was waiting for you guys. Yeah, okay. So I've got this. I'm just going to take the first one that's popped up here. But one thing that said is, so the question is this: what things do you have to really be aware of when you are plotting something? There are sometimes bad graphs out there that get out of control. I think that's a really good question. And I sometimes make those bad graphs that get out of control. I think what's difficult when you're doing this as trying to learn is when you're doing it in real life, when you're actually working for a club and you're trying to get answers, there's a particular question that you're trying to answer. And so I always think that the best thing is to find out what question you're trying to answer and visualization answer that question. That's a starting point. There's other types of more neutral data analysis where you really want to find out something. But that's why I set the exercise that you should take a match that you'd seen, you had some preconceptions about that, and you wanted to know, is it really true? So one thing that we did at Hammarby quite early on is we were looking at particular players' defensive contributions, and we could actually plot their defensive contribution and see that some players who we thought weren't defending that well were actually defending really well. And that's just a simple plot where you say, look, I'm interested in defensive contributions. I plot interceptions, I plot ball recoveries, and try and work out how each player is contributing to defense. So I think it's really about having something that's related to a question. So when you're doing these things for yourselves and trying to learn, make a question that you have thought about football or some aspect that a friend has said to you, and then see how to visually answer that question as quickly as possible to explain to them. Actually, it's maybe better if you do take a friend to do it on. Get a friend who has a question and try and answer it to them. And if they understand the visualization, then it's a good visualization. It is a good rule of thumb.
That was awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Have you two got one there? I was go for put Laurie on the spot. How are you doing?
I'm going to put Fran or Javier on the spot again.
Okay. Fran, have you got another one?
No, not really.
Get another one, Fran.
I can jump in if you want. I have one. I mean, it's in the same line of space control and pitch control, but since Will just uploaded the video and we're gonna keep talking about this, I think it's interesting. Mandeep Verma asks, guys, any model or methods to calculate space creation without requiring a lot of data? So that's interesting because actually when we did our pitch control model, if you see the things that Will takes into account to his final model, it's definitely more sophisticated. It's learning those parameters from data, and it's a model that it's going to be more accurate for a lot of things. But the thing that we wanted to do with our model, in the wide open spaces paper, like I can share that link later, and I'm hopefully going to upload a video talking about that, and hopefully part 2 adding also code. Is our main idea was what big assumptions we can make on players' movement, and how can we make a model that is based on balls location and players location and players velocity that take into account those things without requiring data to learn the parameters from that model. So the short answer is that if you implement that or you get grasp to that model, you can basically do it with only one frame of data. So it's going to work for the data you have from Metrica there. And there we propose a way of calculating actually space creation. And the basic idea was multiplying pitch control by any metric of space value. And I think Will provided very nice examples of how can that be done easily. And then that final value, you want to analyze how that changes in time. So typically, I mean, basic thing that you can do is to find a threshold and see how that pitch control times pitch value changes in time. And when it's changing abruptly, you most certainly can say players are creating space. You're not always going to do that very easily. It's good to validate it with video, but simple thing, you can use that model just based on Gaussians, distributions on top of players, and use a very simple pitch value model to get a graph to space creation. And I think you can get interesting results regarding where players are creating space and how they're doing that.
Cool. Okay, Laurie, now you're going to have one.
Well, actually, I just had a follow-up question for Javier there, which is, there's the question of being able to measure space creation. Do you want to talk a little bit about valuing the space that is created? What is a valuable run relative to a run that might be creating space and into space, but doesn't necessarily create, attacking potential or add value to the team's position?
Oh, that's a question for me.
I'm directing it at you. Yeah.
Okay. Also, I mean, I was thinking that you were basically saying that that's an important thing to ask you when you're doing that. But yeah, so I mean, I think David said something very important. That is, it will depend from the question you're trying to answer, because if the question is just creating value, and value means increasing the likelihood of scoring goals, so that's good. You can use something that has to do with goals. But if value means for you, maximizing the game model you want to implement, and that is basically moving the ball around through the inside, but not necessarily you want to correlate that with creating goal chance. So that's a different perspective of value. So what could you use right now? The first thing is distance to the goal is the simplest possible pitch value model. The second one is what we did is building, depending on the location of the ball, trying to learn where that value is, or where the opponent team tends to place themselves, and assume those places are of value, and you're going to find more value in the in the center part of the field than in the sides. That's a possibility. A second one is that you can basically use expected goals models and trying to see the mean. I mean, you can use a heat map of the mean expected goals in the whole field, and that's going to provide a good way of value. But the thing is that it's going to be too biased towards the opponent's goal or the box. So it depends from the question. Fourth thing that you can do is that you might use Jan Van Haren and Lotte Branson available EPB-like model. I forgot the name. They use VAAP. I think this is done with event data, and you can use that and get the mean values for that. And it's going to be a more wide model of getting like a field value, or you can implement an EPV model using event data or using tracking data with shots and passes to get a sense of that. So that's a good way. But then there's hundred of extra things that you can do that is condition that to what Franz said earlier, that is condition that to the actual context and where the players are being placed. But those several things in incremental steps of complexity, I think, can be used as valid, pitch value surfaces.
Another way to say it, actually, all of that is that's where the big questions are just now, I think. I mean, that's where we're sort of building towards in the end of this course, maybe. I mean, in our last paper, we used exactly that. We used an event-based data to get a value type of thing. And then we used the pitch control and the pass probability thing to get the possibility. And we're trying to combine that together. And I think that's where a lot of the problems are, is like just trying to, there are those two things. There's the possibility of making a pass or an event happening, and there's the value of that event, and trying to find those functions. And I think that's like actually what, if there's a sort of, for me, if there's a sort of mathematical race between clubs, it's trying to find the best models of those types of things. Or I think that's what will be happening in the near future. I got one question which I wanted to have a look at, and that was one of the last questions that came in on the chat just now, and it was, do data providers provide visualizations? And I think, or do we have to program them ourselves? And the answer is, well, for me anyway, is that they do provide visualizations, but often clubs have to tailor their own visualizations. So they can't get away with just using the things provided to them from StatsBomb or Opta or these other companies. We have to actually code things ourselves, because every club has a different question about that they want to answer with their data. And that's why they really need to have a data scientist. And I think that's where there probably is a bright future for many of the people who are doing this course and analyzing these types of things, because more and more clubs will need each their own person who's going to code up the particular things that are interested in their sporting philosophy and their coaches practice.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I think that you might use some of the generic visualizations or a thing that providers might give to you, but something that is true is that I think we talked about this in the first video. Was the first thing is, clubs are not tech companies, so you will not have an army of data scientists to do the things. But there's something interesting regarding the people you're trying to answer questions for. So if you see a typical tech company, let's say Facebook with WhatsApp, and you want some new feature in WhatsApp, you're probably not going to get that because you have millions or hundreds of millions of users. You're basically trying to keep that service for hundreds of millions of users. But when you're trying to work with a coaching staff, you probably have 4 or 5 users, or 1 user or 2 users. So if that user wants to change the arrows and don't want to use arrows, but they want to use triangles, and you get to talk with your 1 client or with your 4 or 5 clients, you want to be able to change that to really provide the less noise possible and the less problems as possible to them, so they can get the information through them. So that's probably why we tend to do or we need to do our own visuals. And the second thing is what you said, it was so true, is that the questions and the things are going to depend on people, on the staff, on the problems the clubs have on that particular moment. So it's really hard to see beforehand and to develop beforehand everything that is going to be needed. You can, of course, create more generical tools, but there's a lot of very specific things that need to be developed and need to be developed quickly.
I think one of the nice tools that you often see, one of the tools that you see the data providers providing starts with the video and the ability to augment video, rather than starting with the data and creating visualizations from the data. And that comes back to something else that was discussed in previous weeks, which is, I think for many people that work within clubs, it sounds like when you're presenting things back to coaches and players, it has to be through the medium of video. Not necessarily not scatter plots or heat maps and these types of things, but augmenting video. And so providing the tools to annotate video with things that you found is sort of the most important, most beneficial form of communication. And the challenge for people who work with the raw tracking data is, how can you convert the insights that you've gained from working with the raw data into something that can be presented through the medium of video? Like, what tools are there to convert the visualizations into something that can be layered on top of video?
100%. Yeah.
Great. Well, I feel that we're sort of wrapping up a little bit now. So I think we will wrap up now. And it's been really interesting, great discussions as usual. I really enjoy these discussions, actually. I hope that people who are watching get something from them, because I certainly get something from talking to these guys each week. I'll just say a few what's coming up on the coming weeks. Next week, we're going to have an American special. So we've got Ravi Ramaneni and Devin Ployler are going to come on, and they have both taken their teams to like consecutive MLS Cup finals. I think some of you know these two better than I have. I've never met either of them, actually. I knew Devin from right after when I started working with Soccermatics, because he'd made some of the first passing networks I'd ever seen. But they've been very successful in analytics in the US. And I think the question I was going to pose for them, and I think it will be interesting to see it from a European perspective as well. The question we're going to pose for them is like, is analytics further developed in the US than it is in Europe? So it will be a kind of US versus Europe thing here. And I think because of a lot of American sports, it is very well developed. And so that will be next week on Thursday. The week after that, hopefully it's not entirely clear. It depends a little bit about all the people who come on this show. They have to get things cleared with their clubs, and that's often a problem that not all clubs are that open, and not all countries are that open, because Joris Beckers, who's the US, he works as an analyst for the US national team. He's hopefully getting, but he has to get it cleared with his club. And I thought it would be nice to get him sitting down and talk to Pascal as well. And hopefully we know somebody at the English FA who would be very nice if we could get him on, who we all talk to a lot. And then the week after that, so we've actually got 3 weeks all planned up. We've got Lotte Branson, who worked a lot on exactly what Javier was talking about with the expected possession value. And Jan van, what's Jan's second name? Jan van
Van Haren.
Haren. Yeah, so he has worked together, and they've been developing a lot of this expected possession value on data. So they're going to do a series of videos for us as well. I forgot to mention that Devin is also going to do a video on databases and handling databases. So there's a whole series of different things coming up in the pipeline, and there's going to be some very interesting live meetings. So it's not just the four of us babbling on every week. And then Suds will be back, of course, next week as well. But great. Thank you for watching this evening, and we will see you all again next week. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah.